Welcome, everyone. My name is Jenny Hess, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, Maryland, a 105-year-old nonpartisan organization whose mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. As part of that mission, we sponsor webinars to inform the public on important issues. Support for our programs and voter services come from viewers like you. We welcome your donations so that we can continue to provide high-quality trending topic webinars and other civic educational events to the public and our members at no charge. To donate to the League, visit our homepage at lwvmocomd.org and click on the Donate button at the top of the page. Tonight's program will focus on expanding our understanding of the teaching of civic education. Our speakers will address what civic education is, how it is taught and assessed in Montgomery County Public Schools, innovative approaches, best practices, and exciting new developments in civic education. While this program focuses primarily on the teaching of civic education in Montgomery County Public Schools, we recognize that many students in our county attend religious and private schools or are taught at home. We expect that there will be many themes and suggestions that are relevant for these students. Your questions and comments on this point during the Q&A session are most welcome. Also, we would like to acknowledge that opportunities for civic education are broad and that many organizations provide civic education to youth and adults, including scouts, senior centers, and religious venues. An audience Q&A will follow the presentations. First, some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel at a later date. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media. The links to these will be in the chat. The audience will be muted during the webinar, and the chat box has been disabled to minimize distractions. After our speakers make their presentations, we will have a Q&A session. Questions will be visible as they are answered. We encourage you to ask questions and remind everyone to be respectful of our speakers and each other. To submit a question, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Type your question into the box, then hit send or return. We will answer as many questions as time allows. The program is scheduled to end at 8:30. Now I'm pleased to introduce tonight's moderator, Jeannie Massey. Jeannie is the program coordinator for the Maryland Civic Education Coalition, a cross-partisan organization that brings together students, educators, experts, scholars, and community members to ensure that all Maryland students have access to meaningful, hands-on, comprehensive civic education and service learning opportunities. I'll turn it over to you, Jeannie.
Thanks, Jenny. It's great to be with the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, one of the most amazing women's groups and groups that are interested in civics and democracy in the state of Maryland and across the country. I'm pleased to be here tonight with our three speakers. First, we have Tracy Oliver Gary, who is the Social Studies Coordinator for Montgomery County Public Schools. She'll address what civic education is, how it's taught and assessed in pre-K through high school classes in Montgomery County, and how the blueprint for Maryland's future is part of the journey of civics in our state. Our second speaker is Eliza Newland-Cardy, a dear friend, president and founder of the Civic Circle, a Silver Spring nonprofit that brings democracy and civic learning alive for students, especially at the younger ages. She'll talk about how their programs use music and art to teach civic education and civic participation. Our final speaker tonight will be Sarah McGrew, assistant professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning Policy and Leadership at the University of Maryland College of Education and a participant in the Maryland Democracy Initiative. She'll address the best practices in civic education and in particular expertise in civic learning in the field of digital and media literacy and how these can be incorporated into social studies as well as other subject areas. And she'll share a little bit about her recent research. So I'd like to start with Tracy Oliver Gary from Montgomery County Public Schools. Let's consider this question. What does high quality civic education and civic participation look like in Maryland schools today? How can we ensure that every student has meaningful opportunities to engage in democracy? Our first panelist, Tracy, will help explore these questions as she shares some insights on the state of civic education in Montgomery County schools. Tracy, I'll invite you to share your screen and give us a little presentation, and then we'll come back to some Q&A.
Hi again, everybody. I'm Tracy Oliver Gary, and I am the proud Social Studies Supervisor, Pre-K-12 Social Studies Supervisor for Montgomery County Public Schools. So in the state of Maryland, we have 6 standards for social studies. It's unlike other subjects. The other subjects have many more, but for social studies, we only have 6 standards: civics, peoples of the nation and world, geography, economics, history, and then we have these skills. So those skills are the type of skills that social scientists use, such as contextualization, corroboration, claiming evidence, and then like historical interpretation if it's a history class. But within the 6 standards, we have one, as you can see, as civics. So that means that from kindergarten all the way through what the state has modern world history as the 11th grade course. That's like the last course for the state of Maryland, and then you have electives. But for the core courses from kindergarten to 11th grade, all of them have civics. And those are the ones that the state controls. So it's not going to be like, and what I mean by that is you have IB classes, you have AP classes, advanced placement, international baccalaureate classes. Those are not controlled by the state. But for the content areas, the frameworks that the state creates, and all local educational agencies or school districts have to follow or adapt those frameworks for their local education, for the courses that they govern. And so civics is in all of those from kindergarten through 11th grade. So let's now take a look at what that kind of looks like. And this may be kind of small on your screen, but what I've done for you is that I've created a chart that kind of describes some of the topics that students learn about and when they learn about them. So currently we are in the process, and I would like to say this, we are in the process of revising our elementary social studies curriculum. It's a slow rollout. Last year was the first year we had the new grades 4 and 5 curricula. And then next year we'll have new grade 3 curriculum. But we are still sitting right now with the old curricula for kindergarten through 3rd grade. So you can see, although like for instance, in kindergarten, you have roles and responsibilities, students are learning about that. They learn about civic action and leadership. In 2nd grade, they learn about the same things. It's a spiral. And that's in 1st grade. And then in 2nd grade, they began to learn about democratic principles, roles and responsibilities, and civic action. In 3rd grade, with the old curriculum that students still have this year, it's the same thing. It's just a spiral. However, you begin to see a more in-depth study of civics with the revised curriculum. And the state changed the curricula in order for students to begin to learn about civics at an earlier age. So as we revise the curricula, as new curricula comes out for kindergarten through 3rd grade, those students will experience much more civic learning. So if you compare the current 3rd grade, which is the old curriculum, you have many more topics. So next school year, students in 3rd grade will learn about democratic principles. They will learn about the structure of government, the separation of powers, balance, checks and balances, federalism. They will still learn about roles and responsibilities. They will learn about elections, civic action, leadership, and the impact that the government has on people. So it's much more robust. And then you can see for grades 4 and 5, that is basically, those two grades are like a little mini MINI U.S. history survey course over 2 years. The state also was intentional about students learning a deeper understanding or developing a deeper understanding of U.S. history. And included in that is civics, right? And so some of the topics that students learn, the foundation, the establishment of the government and or the different amendments, which they learn about the amendments, the structure of government, separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism. They learn about roles and responsibilities, civic action. And then in 5th grade, they also learn more about leadership, because this is the fifth grade is really where we're seeing the United States, like after the Articles of Confederation. And they also learn about the impact of government on people. Middle school curricula is separated into 2 years of early world history, pre-modern world history for grade 6 and 7. And then in grade 8, it's the first half of U.S. history up to 1900. So pre-colonialism to 1900. And so although it is that students are studying world history in grade 6 and 7, they still are learning some civics. So they still learn about democracies, but their democracies not in the United States. They will learn about leaders. They will learn about how the impact of the government on people, but they're learning about them in different countries, not the United States. We pick back up with the United States in grade 8, and you can see that it becomes much more robust. We're in the United States, and they learn about the democratic principles, the foundation of the foundational things of a democracy, the structure of government, roles and responsibilities, civic action, leadership, and impact of government, and different policies, so economic and foreign policy. And then grade 9 is the second half of U.S. history, and they continue to learn different things. I want to go through, I don't want to lose my end with my time. I have more slides. But NSL, our national, state, and local government class, is the government class in 10th grade that students take. And that course has it's a comprehensive 2-semester long class of civic instruction. So it has all aspects of civics in it. And then in modern world history, once again, they are learning about governments, they're learning about democracies, but they are going to be in other countries, not situated in the United States. All right, so within the different courses that we have, students do research projects. And these projects they are in elementary. We are writing them into the new curricula that elementary students will have and have access to now in grades 4 and 5, but will also have access to in grade 3, where they are actually doing projects, learning how to advocate. Okay, learning about democratic ideals. We have research projects that are in our middle school and our high school curricula as well. And in middle school, in grade 8, the U.S. history grade 8 curriculum, and in our national, state, and local government class, that's the NSL curriculum, their research projects, they actually earn student service learning hours for completing them. That's part of the curriculum. And some of the types of projects that they're doing in these social studies classes focus on advocacy, democratic ideals, civic leaders, hate crimes, and environmental protection. And funny thing, so I just got 3 letters from students, and it had to have been an advocacy project because they were advocating for changes in the social studies curriculum, and I just absolutely loved it. So that's them using their voices. What is new which started last year, but will really impact our national, state, and local government students, that's NSL, this year because it's 10th grade, is a new exam called the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, American Government End of Course Assessment or exam. And that you may hear people say the EOC, end of course exam, but this is only for national, state, and local government students, or NSL students. It's not for AP government students. This is an exam that's given by MSDE, the Maryland State Department of Education, and it is worth 20% of students' semester B grade. Their quarter 3 grade and quarter 4 grades will make up 80% of the grade. And then 20% of that grade is the external state assessment, only for NSL students. So the assessment limits, which basically are the things that are on the test, those topics and the skills that are assessed on this exam are interwoven in elementary and middle and some of 9th grade and then all of 10th grade. So the goal is that the things that students are assessed on, many of the topics that the students are assessed on, they don't just learn about them in their NSL or national, state, and local government classes. They are also learning about them. They should be learning about them in elementary, especially with the revisions that are coming out. That's why it's more in depth, because we have this big exam. They're learning about them in middle school, and they're learning about them in high school as well. This is new. This year will be the first year our 10th graders are taking this exam. It's also in biology. We also have a big focus on elections, right? Each election year, we put out an election guide, and we actually use the League of Women Voters as part of like one of the resources for creating the election guide. Last November or the fall, we partnered with Voting Buddy, and we became a pilot where they created a student version of their app to learn about local candidates and to also understand themselves as voters and what their beliefs are, or who they're looking for in a candidate based on their beliefs. We partner with them, and we had the schools that opted in, middle and high school students using Voting Buddy to become more literate about the election. We also provided a mock election resource. We do not have a county-wide mock election, but we create a packet for schools if they should want to do a mock election. They have that resource. We also have a Changemaker workshop that we have every year. This is part of our Remembrance and Reconciliation Month learning. Remembrance and Reconciliation Month is, we've gotten it from, there's a commission from the county, Montgomery County's Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation. It was created to raise awareness and to research and to create markers for the 3 lynching victims that who were killed in Montgomery County. I represent Montgomery County Public Schools on that commission, and lynching is not necessarily age appropriate for all students. And so therefore I broadened it out to looking at local African-American history and learning about local African-American history for our students. Within that month, we have an annual Changemaker workshop where the whole purpose of that workshop is teaching students how to advocate in their communities, how to make change happen, how to exercise their rights as citizens or residents in Montgomery County to advocate for change. It's virtual, and students earn 2 service learning hours. And what we do is we have community advocates and or organizations who teach students about their organizations, but also teach them how to advocate as well, how to take informed action in their communities. We also provide teachers with professional learning on how to have discussions on contentious topics, which is a very dicey thing, and a scary thing for many teachers. And I'll be honest, especially around any election time, it's very hard. Some teachers feel that they're walking a tightrope and they don't want to say anything that someone may then say that they're biased or things like that. So we provide a lot of support. And actually this last election, we provided a lot of support for teachers and the county did this as a whole for how to talk about elections in the class, how to, what teachers were allowed to say, what they were not allowed to say as far as being partisan, things like that, and being balanced in how they talked about elections. That's all part of like understanding how to facilitate a contentious topic. This could be any new or current event in a classroom. And some teachers, although we highly encourage it and we expect students to be able to talk about current events and talking about what's going on in the government, things like that, not every teacher is equipped with the skills to be able to do so. And so Street Law, an organization, actually partner with us, or we partner with them to have some teachers to take a course called, or professional learning, talking about current and contested issues in schools, or their Talks program. We've also created a guide for teachers that teaches them what to do before the learning occurs or before the discussion, what to do during the discussion, especially if any student should say something that is offensive, or if a student is outraged or whatever it is, how to interrupt that or how to redirect, how to make sure students feel heard, and then what to do after as well. If harm has occurred in that conversation, how do you go back and repair that harm? Or how do you follow up? So we have this discussion guide that is available for teachers, but I do want to be totally transparent. This is one of our biggest growth areas for helping teachers, elementary and secondary, for learning how to discuss these in ways that they feel aren't gotchas at times. So, or where they know how to navigate a conversation that is heated. Not everyone feels comfortable navigating that conversation. And we're trying to build our staff's ability to do that. And as far as for the blueprint for Maryland's future, unfortunately, social studies is not explicitly called out in the blueprint. It's just not. However, we do support the goals of blueprint. Social studies, without a doubt, is a literacy-based subject. Our students learn any of our core, like our content. The content should be learned through inquiry, meaning that students should be developing their own understanding of the content through the analysis of primary and secondary sources. That is the goal, that students are developing their understanding. The goal is not for the teacher to tell them everything. The goal is for students to develop that understanding. And in order to do that, they must be able to read and comprehend the text that's before them. Additionally, social studies creates the contextual or background knowledge that is needed in order to comprehend a text that they're reading. So the state of Maryland has adopted something called the science of reading. And the science of reading simply says that you can't just use context clues to figure out the meaning of something. If it is a topic that you know nothing about, you can try to use context clues all you want to. It still will not unearth the meaning of that text. And social studies, Natalie Wexler wrote a book called The Knowledge Gap, and she highlighted how social studies is pivotal. It is extremely important for students to take social studies because social studies provides a ton of background knowledge that an author assumes that the reader knows. So if someone is writing about something, they may throw a topic in there And they don't explain it because they're assuming that the reader knows about that topic. And many of those topics are covered in social studies. Additionally, the Fordham Institute did had a study that demonstrated how if students had consistent social studies instruction throughout the year, their literacy scores would improve. But that just it corroborates what Natalie Wexler's content or her research says. And then secondly, for secondary, for middle and high, that's for middle and high school social studies classes, we have trained teachers and resource teachers. Those are department chairs, content specialists, and the middle school level, those are the department chairs, on a strategy called PACT. And this is from the University of Maryland. It means Promoting Adolescents' Comprehension of Text. And all of our schools, or the vast majority of them, are adopting this strategy to help build literacy strategies or literacy skills of students, because in the blueprint, it does focus on literacy. People assume that's just ELA. However, social studies 100% supports literacy development of students. And so in that way, we're supporting the blueprint. But there is nothing that is called out specifically for social studies in the blueprint. And I hope I didn't go over my time. And that's my last slide.
All of this is great information, Tracy. I do have a couple of questions quickly for clarification. The research projects that you mentioned in various grades, are the topics that are pursued by the students based on a little bit of individual choice? Do the students develop their own projects similar to National History Day?
Yes, so basically what would happen is the students will be learning about a topic. So let's take hate crimes as an example, because this one is in the national, local, and national, state, and local government, or NSL curriculum. They are learning about hate crimes, and they will then select a group to study. So all of these projects are student driven. Any project should be student driven. That they are learning about a topic, but the way that they want to enter in studying that topic further is up to them.
That's wonderful. How about, you mentioned street law, a venerated group here in Maryland that has been around since the 70s. Their resources are incredibly high quality. When it comes to the blueprint's move to high quality instructional materials, will Montgomery County be able to include programs like We the People and Project Citizen and various other curriculums that allow teachers to dive deeply into constitutional literacy and civic education and empower their students?
Okay, so Maryland right now, they are in the process of developing the rubrics for high quality instructional materials for social studies. There's no national standard for that for social studies. And the way that, so for clarity, for Montgomery County, we write our curriculum. We do not purchase, like the NSL curriculum is written in-house. We get teachers to support, but that is written in-house. Any supplemental material, when we get that standard, we'll have to go through that vetting process. So this is all new territory. I don't have a definitive answer for you, but additionally, the way that that some have used high quality instructional materials as well is like sometimes for comprehensive curricula, like your whole year of curriculum. But also it's yet to be seen how that standard of high quality instructional material will impact supplemental materials. I am not sure, because the examples that were in the question would be supplemental materials, not core content. And I'm unsure how that will, how the HQIM, high quality instructional materials, will be applied to those. I'm not sure.
I think everyone's interested in how the blueprint will evolve, and given the funding fights right now, it's an interesting time to be in Maryland.
Yeah,
well,
and
thank you.
And yeah, can I just also say too, the supplemental materials, if there's a cost to them, there's that issue as well. And whether or not funding is allocated at the district level, or if the school has enough money for it. So just because something is available doesn't necessarily mean that we have access to it if there is a cost associated to it. And that's just the unfortunate truth.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. It's pretty incredible to see the variety of approaches that you all take to support civic learning and civic participation. I can say for certain I've been impressed by young people from Montgomery County schools. Even an 8th grader testified in the House Ways and Means Committee when I was there in January. So kudos to the school system. I know it's a tough time to be involved in schools in general and social studies in particular. So I'm going to segue now to our next speaker, Eliza Newland-Carney, founder and president of the Civic Circle. Through the arts, storytelling, music, theater, poetry, the Civic Circle is making civic education accessible and engaging for young learners with a team of incredible supporters, volunteers, teachers. And Eliza, we're excited to hear how creativity can be a powerful tool to support and strengthen democracy. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Jeannie, and thanks to the League for hosting this event, for your advocacy for democracy, and for selecting civic learning as a topic. And thank you to Tracy and Montgomery County for doubling down on civic learning, which is so crucial right now. When we talk about civic learning, it's worth remembering that for the founders, all of learning was civic learning. The entire purpose of public education originally was to prepare citizens for self-governance. And the founders had a substantial fear that if you turned the decision over who was to run the government over to the people, that they might, if they didn't have the correct information, select a tyrant, which is obviously something the founders were trying to get away from. And so Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, others advocated public education, principally to ensure that we had an informed citizenry and so that democracy could survive. Unfortunately, we've gotten away, frankly, from the civic mission of public schools, if you will. And as Tracy mentioned, for many teachers, it's an awkward place to be because we're unfortunately in a time, and this is not new actually, when the so-called history wars create different views of what it is that people should be learning, what students should be learning. And, there are going to be some who say we should be learning how great America is and all of the nation's fabulous success stories. And there may be some who say what we really should be teaching students is how to become advocates to make the world a better place. What the Civic Circle tries to do is focus on civic skills that we can all agree on. One of our, I think, successes as an organization is to identify these 7 steps of democracy, which you see behind me: listen, learn, choose, join, speak, act, and lead. And I'll come back to this, but the idea is these are skills that sort of cut through difference, that cut through partisan disagreement. As you know, Jeannie, we started with a focus on grades 3 to 5, but we are now expanding to reach students in middle and upper school. And like Tracy, I do have a little slide deck that I'm going to share because I think it helps sort of bring the program to life. So our mission is to empower students to understand and participate in democracy using music and the arts. And part of our mission too, which isn't written here, is to inspire compassionate, informed, engaged citizens. And this is something that is relevant not only to young students, but to students of any age, all the way through college and even to adults. So why do we need civic learning out of school? And our wheelhouse is out of school time programming. Well, obviously the schools can do as best as they can, but as Jenny mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of civic learning already going on at the community level. Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, places of worship. This is a great place for students to figure out who they are, what their place in the community is, and what it is that they can give back. And, civic learning, unfortunately, has been vastly underfunded compared to, say, STEM, which has gotten literally hundreds of times more funding than civic education has. And one of our missions is to close what's been documented as an equity gap in civic learning and engagement. What we find is that students in underserved communities are not getting as much access to civic education, and they're not getting as much civic engagement. You might have a situation where if a parent is not voting, the child is not taken to vote. And, in some communities, a parent might him or herself, serve in the government, but that might not be the case, in every community, especially here where the Civic Circle is located in eastern Montgomery County. We very deliberately offer free programming to Title I schools only. And so our solution is to create this innovative curriculum, as I said, around these 7 civic skills, and to use music and the arts to make democracy fun and exciting for students. A challenge, especially when you try to teach young kids about democracy and government, is these are pretty abstract concepts. They're hard to explain, and students can tune out and they don't feel it's relevant to them. But when you get them actually singing songs or doing poetry or using the humanities, we're very big on the humanities and on humanities resources. They do perk up and they get to sort of own the materials in ways that I'll explain as well. So we have sort of 4 major offerings right now. I'd say the core of our program is these after-school workshops, which started for grades 3 to 5 and are now being piloted in middle and upper school as well. We also have assembly shows, which are strictly for grades pre-K to 5. We have civic songs on all 7 steps to democracy in a variety of styles, Latin American, hip hop. We have a very interactive show, and little kids love it. And sometimes we'll go into an elementary school and offer a little civic club, and it's a great way to recruit students for the civic club. We have now taken our Civics in 7 Steps curriculum and made it available on the web. So any parent, any teacher, any homeschooler has access to our lesson plans, our facilitator guides, our free educational videos, and slide decks and handouts on the web. And we do these community civic events as well. We had a democracy concert on the eve of the 2024 election to get students and families excited about voting. We just had a youth democracy fest at Montgomery College's Cultural Arts Center here in Silver Spring. And students perform their own songs and poems about the 7 steps to democracy at the heart of our program. So that is one way we're reaching into the upper grades. And we want to make that an annual event and in fact, try to work with the schools about ways we can get students involved in using the arts as a tool to advance some of the other civic skills that they're learning in the classroom. So what are these 7 steps? Well, the first step is civility and peaceful conflict resolution. It's respect. It's also peace and the power of peace as a tool, a social change tool. Learn is news literacy and digital responsibility. That's especially important for the young kids who now have access to a lot of devices and are sometimes posting things that they shouldn't be because they're hurtful or not very civic, how to be a good citizen online. Choose is voting. And, obviously there's research, and I'm sure the League of Women Voters knows this, that reflects that if you learn about voting and how to vote, you vote. Hello, let's teach people how to vote so they actually go do it. And one of our messages too is that there are other ways you can be involved in an election. Not only how do we vote, but why do we vote? Why is this important? And, you don't have to be a teen. You don't even have to be a citizen to go help people with their campaigns. Join is service learning and helping others. It's pretty exciting. One of the leading outcomes of our pre-post surveys that students leave our program more excited about service learning, which is, I think, a valuable outcome. And we engage them in service learning at a young age. The goal is to get them excited about service learning so that when they reach middle school, they're kind of the service learning rock stars and don't have any difficulty meeting their 75-hour service learning requirement. And when they're middle and high school, we actually engage them in service learning activities to help them earn those hours. Speak, act, and lead are advocacy, organizing, running for office, or leading in any way that you can. Students write a letter to public officials. They engage in sort of a mock advocacy campaign. They learn about who is running for office and who represents them in office. There's a misunderstanding, especially with the young kids, that we vote only for president. but we try to make sure they understand they're voting for all kinds of people up and down the ticket, including school board members who have quite a lot of influence over their daily lives. And we're still a pretty young group, a small group, but we have managed to leverage meaningful partnerships with Montgomery Housing Partnership, which offers an after-school program themselves through their community life program. Montgomery Housing Partnership is an affordable housing provider in our region. Excel Beyond the Bell, which offers after-school programming through the Recreation Department and other partners. Action Youth Media, which offers civic learning through videography and documentation. Arts on the Block, which does visual arts that's very civic. A lot of public art projects in our region come from there. Carpe Diem Arts, which is an arts group with a very civic focus. Liberty's Promise, which offers civic learning to immigrant youth. And this got cut off, I'm afraid, but Story Tapestries is a very successful arts group in our region that has also helped us with some of our workshops and most recently the Democracy Fest that we did. So what happens in these after-school workshops? Well, students do social studies activities. They might do a mock election. They do arts residencies. A poet or an artist or a songwriter will come in and they'll create their own civic songs, poems, and art about one or more of the 7 steps to democracy at the heart of our program. And then they showcase these either for parents or for peers or for younger students. Down here, we have a group of students at Weller Road Elementary School, wrote and learned a bunch of civic songs. They were in grades 3 to 5, and then they performed them for grades K to 2. So we have this wonderful peer-to-peer learning that takes place, and we love that the little kids look up to the older kids. So let's say the high schoolers produce something, they might perform it or share it with the younger kids. Middle schoolers might share with grades 3 to 5. Grades 3 to 5 might share with pre-K. We haven't gotten kindergartners involved in civic learning yet. It's a little young, but they do get the benefit of our assembly show. So what is our impact? I identified our aspirational impact is to empower students, to give them a place where they can thrive, and also where give them the tools to achieve. And we talked about how students leave more excited about service learning. They learn, they leave better able to tell, one way to settle an argument, one way to tell whether a story is true, better able to say who represents them in government. These are all tools that give them a sense of agency and a sense that they can make a change in the world. As Tracy alluded to, civic learning advances literacy and also social emotional learning. Students who are writing poems and songs and delving into humanities materials are learning to be better readers and writers, which is extremely important, especially post-COVID. The social emotional piece is, the very first thing they learn is to listen. Listen is respect, treat others the way you want to be treated. They have a place where they can come after school and feel safe, and they're not going to be bullied. We're not going to put up with that. It doesn't happen. The classes are small enough so we can make sure that one of their activities is to create a Bill of Rights and Bill of Responsibilities in the classroom. So they really learn what does it mean to be a good citizen in this classroom. And we use the term citizen in a broad sense of any member of a community. And when they perform their own songs and poems and create art and show it to younger kids, they build a lot of confidence and they have an opportunity for self-expression. And it has been stated there is a correlation between civic learning and college and career readiness. These are going to be hopefully the future voters and volunteers of our communities. And closing the equity gap is not just closing an equity gap in civic learning and engagement. Hopefully it's going to advance anti-poverty objectives as well. Because if people, in fact, have the tools to tell their elected officials that they need better jobs or roads or other resources, then we'll have a better, more thriving community as well. So let me see if I can make this advance. Excuse me. Yes, here we go. Just examples of some of the service learning activities we've done. Knotting blankets for foster youth, cards for seniors and hospital patients, writing and performing songs for members of the community, creating toys for animals and shelters, decorating bookmarks to go with free books at food distribution sites. And some of these have been done by pretty young kids, grades 3, 4, and 5, but they love it. And I think they're learning that when you help others, you feel better. So there's a mental health component to this as well, honestly. So we, as I say, started in grades 3 to 5, moving to middle and high school. We already work with college-age youth as guest speakers. We have a vision that there might even be a way that college-age youth could help deliver this program. Our focus is principally Montgomery County, but we consider ourselves a DMV region group. We're doing programs shortly at Columbia Heights Education Campus in DC. You know, it's interesting, people reach out to us because they say their students are interested in social justice, and they're not really aware of that many groups that are advancing this in an out of school time context. So they come to us, and we're quite happy to bring in our poets and artists to work with them. I did mention our curriculum. We were fortunate enough to receive a grant from the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County to take all of the work that we've been doing with students over the last 5-6 years and create a nice professional looking collection of slide decks, facilitator guides, student handouts, videos, and educational videos and songs. So if you're a homeschooler, if you're doing out of school time programming, or if you're a teacher, this is all available to you. And we not infrequently do little orientations and trainings to familiarize people with these resources. So if you want to learn more, please visit our website, theciviccircle.org. Like the League, we rely on you for support. We're sort of at a crucial juncture, both programmatically and organizationally, trying to move beyond being a mostly volunteer-run group and bring on senior staff. We feel that this civic learning mission that we all share is more urgent now than ever before. So the urgency is there, and let's hope everyone takes advantage of the opportunity to do something positive for democracy by promoting civic learning. So we want our annual Democracy Fest to be an annual event. I mentioned the possibility for college partners. I mentioned our trajectory of growth. And if you have questions, please feel free to contact me. My email is ecarney@theciviccircle.org. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Jeannie, you might have a question, and or others might have questions. But I think I have used my time, have I not? So probably,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. You have done a marvelous job. In fact, the couple of questions that I had brainstormed ahead of time, you answered marvelously. I do have one, and I want to encourage all of the participants. You're welcome to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll be asking all of the panelists a few questions at the end, and we hope that you have some questions you'd like to share with us. Eliza, the question I have for you is there a particular area of need? I know that in Washington County, some of the immigrant communities speak languages that the groups working with immigrants don't necessarily speak. Is there a particular area of arts or civics or skills or languages that your group is looking to fill a hole, an area of need?
You mean the community's need, the need of
Sure,
the community?
absolutely.
Yes, I think the community is looking for a place where students can gather after school. And they are, in fact, looking for arts enrichment as one of their the things they want to offer youth.
And
One of
if there are additional spaces available to the Civic Circle, do you have enough volunteers and teachers and staff to fill them?
What we're trying to do at this point, Jeannie, if a teacher comes to us from, say, Washington County or even New Jersey, which has happened, what I try to say is, you know, we have a curriculum available to you online, and we will spend time training you on the use of this curriculum. Uh, it does not, you do not actually have to be the Civic Circle to run this program. You know, in fact, a lot of the songs that we use as an educational tool for the kids, we've recorded in song videos. It's like Sesame Street. You can watch the song video, you know. So, but also teachers can go to the art teacher at the school, or they can go to the music teacher at the school and have little collaborations. So there are a lot of different ways our program can be offered. And one of the nice things about having this structure of 7 civic skills we call steps to democracy is you could take one piece of it. Let's say a teacher is having problems conveying the concept of civility and respect in their classroom. They could come to us and we say, we're going to come in and do one-hour workshop on the step to democracy of listen. And we have poems. You can engage in collective poetry or blended poetry. You can read some poetry. You can do some writing, or we can write a song together about what does it mean to treat others the way you want to be treated. And, you know, that could be it. Or we could spend the entire semester with you if that's what you want. a sort of more typical model that we're really evolving to, Jeannie, is more, not 8 to 10 weeks, 1 hour at a time, or 8 to 10 hour long sessions, and they can be squished together if you want them, where especially a teaching artist works with the youth to prepare a civic art piece, and they can then showcase it. That's sort of evolving into a really effective model for us.
I love it. And I think that a lot of Americans, a lot of us, think of social studies as the natural backbone of civic teaching and learning experiences. But you've clearly shown how artists, theater majors, all of the humanities can really embrace civics. And I love that idea that we could move it further into science and mathematics, and every adult in our community should think of themselves as a civic actor, a civic teacher. So thank you for sharing how fun and interactive it can be, especially in a time when, civil discourse can feel a little overwhelming. So I'm going to invite Sarah McGrew to share a little bit of her research and expertise with us. Civic engagement is also shaped by the information students encounter in the world around them, and especially in online spaces today. That's why I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Sarah McGrew, who will share some of her expertise in digital media literacy. And Sarah, we look forward to your perspective. I'll pass the mic to you so you can share your slides and help us understand how we can help young people, and perhaps not always young people.
Sure. Thanks, Jeannie. Let me just share my slides there. And I'm actually going to start, as you can see from this title, talking a little bit about best practices. And I think this will actually take a lot of the threads that both Tracy and Eliza have been sharing and sort of bring them together, share what we know from research about what works really well to support students to be effective civic actors. And then I'll give an example of teaching civics across the curriculum from my own research on teaching digital media literacy. I will say I'm a former social studies teacher, so my heart is very much in social studies teaching and the role that it plays in civic education. But I also really believe that every teacher, just like every teacher is a reading teacher, I think every teacher is a civics teacher. And in order to confront the civic issues that we face in this country, we really have to support all of our teachers to be civics teachers. So starting with a kind of broad overview of what we know about what works in civic education, and this will hopefully demonstrate my point that civic education needs to happen across subject areas and really across the school, both in and out of classroom spaces. So we have this report from 2003, so more than 20 years ago, with these six proven practices in civic education. So these are 6 practices that we know based on a lot of research support students to develop civic knowledge, skills, and dispositions. So some of these are straightforward, right? So the first one is civic courses on civics, law, and democracy, right? This is Maryland's 10th grade NSL course that Tracy was talking about, but courses that teach students the sort of government knowledge, civics knowledge that they need to engage in systems of government and democracy. The next ones are maybe not so straightforward, right? So the second proven practice is participating and supporting students to participate in deliberations and discussions of current controversial issues. So Tracy talked about those controversial issues discussions, and this is something that's really hard for teachers to learn how to do well, but something that we know is so important for students in terms of developing students' knowledge of whatever area they're discussing, but even more importantly, their skill, especially their skill at disagreeing with each other respectfully, right? And if you think about the democracy we live in today, that's something I think that most of us could use more practice at. And we know it's something that if students learn to do in school in a supportive environment, that they get better at and can practice as adults. The third piece here is service learning, which you heard again, both Tracy and Eliza talk about. And this is really doing community service, but also learning as you're doing that service about the issue that you're serving. So if you're, serving food at a soup kitchen, think you're like learning about the issue of food insecurity or homelessness at the same time as you're doing the volunteer work. And we know that service learning especially improve students, sort of the way that students value engaging in and serving their communities in the long term, even after they complete that service learning, which is why it's great that Maryland has the service learning requirement that it does. The fourth piece here is student-led extracurricular activities and organizations. So again, sort of just along with service learning, we know that when students have a chance to engage and lead in those extracurricular activities, they're basically practicing the kind of participation that we want them to enact as adults. So they build agency, they build, again, those sort of habits of participation and collaboration that civic engagement as adults requires. The fifth piece here is student voice in schools and school governance. So, and this requires, I think, thinking about schools as a civic institution, right? Schools are probably the civic institution that students interact with the most, right? They spend time almost every day in them. So the way that the school treats students is sort of a way that students start to interpret how responsive civic institutions are to them and what they need. So the more sort of active role that students can play in school governance, the better their civic outcomes, we know. So if students are going to like a very sort of authoritarian school that's not taking their opinions into account, they're less likely to have as positive civic outcomes. And then finally, participating in simulations of adult participation in democratic processes and procedures. So this is things like mock trial or model UN or youth in government or having a school-wide kind of mock election, which Tracy talked about, I think. So anything like that that's helping students, again, kind of practice and prepare for things that they're going to do as adults, things they might not be allowed to do yet. But again, helping them sort of build the efficacy and the participatory skills that they need to engage in those activities. So those are 6 proven practices. Again, those are from 2003, from this report, The Civic Mission of Schools. And since then, the same sort of group of authors developed and published in 2017 these additional kind of promising practices. So things that maybe don't have quite as much research because they're a little bit more recent, but still have really promising outcomes in terms of students, again, civic knowledge, dispositions, and skills. So the first one is news and media literacy education. This is where my research focuses, and I'm going to jump into talking a lot more about this in a second, but this is basically training students to think critically about the information that they encounter in their lives, whether that's in print or online, and helping them make informed decisions about what to trust. Social emotional learning is teaching a range of skills, right? And Eliza mentioned this as well, but if you think about teaching things like managing your emotions or goal setting, practicing empathy, building positive relationships, there's a lot of overlap between those socio-emotional skills and the skills we need to be good citizens or good civic actors. So social-emotional learning and the schools that support it, again, are often cultivating strong citizens. This next piece is action civics. And this is an approach to civics, which students start really by defining and researching a problem, thinking about what they think potential solutions to that problem could be, and then actually engaging in advocacy to advocate for their proposed solution, whether that's advocating businesses or government directly to change in some way. And then this final piece is school climate reform. Which is, again, another kind of big picture whole school thing. But we know from data that students, for example, who are suspended multiple times in high school are less likely to vote years later. So things like school suspensions can really negatively impact particularly students of color and their likelihood to vote and participate in democracy in the future. And again, if we think about schools as civic institutions that students interact with, if they're suspended multiple times, students and their families might have an increasingly kind of negative view of school and a feeling that school isn't treating them fairly, and therefore civic institutions broadly might not treat them fairly and be less likely to participate as a result. So again, we know that schools that do things like practice restorative justice instead of things like, a high yield suspension policy are again more likely to cultivate students' civic dispositions in particular. So now I want to think about where these practices live in school. Again, to my point, and this is my organization, so we could probably move things around. But to my point that civic education should be rooted in social studies classrooms, but shouldn't live only in social studies classrooms, right? This is everyone's responsibility, I think. So obviously social studies classrooms can have that, classes in civics, law, and democracy, and action civics often lives in social studies, but I think any subject area class can engage students in deliberations of current controversial issues, right? Science classrooms that are talking about having deliberations about important socioscientific issues like climate change, for example. Service learning can exist in any subject area class. Students can do simulations of democratic processes at a school-wide level. They can engage in media literacy education, which we're going to come back to, as well as socio-emotional learning in any subject area, starting in elementary school, hopefully. And then we have these things that really need to happen at a school-wide level, right? There needs to be school-level institutional support for extracurricular activities that are led by students, for student voice in school governance, and for school climate reform. And again, social studies teachers absolutely play a role in advocating for those changes, but they can't be the only ones pushing for those change. So again, I want to spend just a few minutes now highlighting media literacy education as an example of something that could be taught in any subject area. I've worked a lot with social studies teachers in this area, but also with science and English language arts teachers, and even physical education teachers. So it's something that can really live across the curriculum. And if we look at this area in particular, we know from data, thinking about where teens spend a lot of their time and get a lot of their information, and this will not be a surprise to anyone who spends time with teenagers, but this poll from Pew in 2023 found that nearly half of teens reported that they were online almost constantly, 46%. And then the other half of them said several times a day. So teens are spending tons of time online, and they're reporting that those online sources, and particularly social media, are the place that they are turning when they need information about the world. And of course, when we get news online, there's our barriers to information access are lower, which is great. We see a greater diversity of stories from a range of authors, right? Like news anchors and TV editors no longer have as much control over what we read and hear. But of course, online platforms are prioritizing our attention over giving us accurate information. Those spaces are really quickly consuming and diverting our attention, and it's increasingly up to us to decide what to believe. And we know, again, from a lot of my research and others, that students need a lot more support learning digital media literacy, learning to effectively evaluate information online. So these are data from college students, college freshmen for the most part. We know that just a quarter of them, and this is one of my studies, accurately described how search engine algorithms rank search results. Just a third know that a .org website is not always more reliable than a .com. And less than a quarter could effectively evaluate a website that contests climate change and is backed by fossil fuel companies. So these are, bright college students that have graduated, have made it through K-12 education and are still really have a lot of room to grow in their ability to effectively evaluate information. And again, if we think about how much time young people are spending in these spaces and the kinds of information they're getting from them, this is scary to me, at least, and to the future of our democracy. But we also know from my research some effective digital media literacy strategies that we can teach. So when I was in grad school, did some research with professional fact checkers to understand how these, professionals at searching for and evaluating information made decisions about what to trust online. And we identified a few really powerful, flexible strategies that we can teach students. And one of those strategies is lateral reading. So when we land on an unfamiliar site, instead of staying on that site and trying to read it or judge it based on its appearance, we leave the site, search for more information about it, through a search engine search, and use sites even like Wikipedia, we saw fact checkers use to learn more information about the source and how credible it is before going back to read the source. And lateral reading, so again, distrusting what a site says or shows about itself, and then leaving the site and searching for information about the source through other reliable sites. So lateral reading is really effective. It's quick once you practice and learn it, and it's quite different from vertical reading, which is sort of the typical approach to evaluating print information, and often what students learn in school, right? And that's drawing conclusions about the reliability of a site based on the quality or amount of information, whether it has, high quality appearing links and references, whether it's a URL is a .org or .edu, whether it has ads, looks professional, or what it says on its about page. And all of those are not very effective ways to evaluate a website. They might work some of the time, especially if you're really an expert in the area, but most of the time, these things just don't work on the internet that we have today and how complex it is, especially with things like AI-generated content and just how easy it is to produce really professional, credible-looking information, even if you're a completely uncredible source. One more strategy that we found professional fact checkers using was click restraint. So when they were on search results, fact checkers slowed down and scrolled really like read search results pages before they made decisions about where to click first. So research suggests that most of our students really quickly click on the first or second result without really thinking much about it, trusting search engines to just rank results for us. But again, that's putting a lot of trust in search engine companies. So fact checkers were, slowing down, making decisions about where to click by actually reading and scanning titles, URLs, and snippets. And like I said, I've worked with teachers across subject areas to teach these strategies like lateral reading and click restraint. So these are examples from a science class where students were evaluating different social media posts, as you can see, about subjects that were tied to the curriculum, whether it was GMOs or nutrition questions. This was a biology course. But again, just showing that these as examples, that there are ways to fit these into the curriculum so we can teach these skills across subjects. The science teacher also then assigned students to find a social media post on their own that was related to nutrition and then basically make a screen recording of themselves reading laterally about it as an assessment. So just another way to kind of bring lateral reading into students' own lives by having them locate the post on their own social media feed. And then in social studies classrooms, lots of possibilities here. Here are just a few from Instagram posts about history that students were evaluating, or much more current events, RT in the middle, the kind of Russian government sites that students evaluated about a recent current event or recent at the time, or articles like the one on the right from Odyssey about sort of modern day implications of historical events. Has the Constitution betrayed the colonists' beliefs? So lots of options, again, for ways that we connected the things that we were supporting students to evaluate to the content of social studies classrooms, so teachers felt like they could teach these. And finally, just to kind of wrap up, we know that when we explicitly teach these evaluation strategies, again, across social studies, science, ELA courses, even with older adults, as you can see on this headline, people get better at making decisions about what to trust, at both identifying misinformation and locating credible content. And both of those things are equally important, right? Being able to sniff out the bad content, but also to be able to locate credible information that we can use to inform our decisions and actions. So again, just to return to this, that's just one example, media literacy education, but hopefully shows how we can really thread these, anchor them in social studies, but also thread them throughout other subject areas and really throughout the whole school. And I'll stop there. There's my email, magru@umd.edu. Happy to be in touch if you have additional questions. And looking forward to your questions now.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that breaking down these challenges and some of the techniques that we can use to overcome them are useful even for our own habits. And seeing how deliberately teachers can teach them is really interesting. I wonder, as the technology evolves, and now we also have to deal with artificial intelligence and images that are created completely imaginary by artificial intelligence, do you have any thoughts on where we go next with your studies, with teaching about social media and so forth?
Yeah, to me, it just increases the importance of spending time in school talking about it with students. And of course, I'm doing work on my own and with colleagues to sort of think about how do we need to update the methods that we're teaching in the face of so much AI generated content. But for me, it still goes back to those fundamental, so much of what we see from students is this kind of like seeing is believing approach, right? Like if I see a video and it says one thing, like if I see it in the video, then I trust it. And we were finding that, pre 10 years ago, even like before AI generated content existed. So the fact that now we can like really easily produce basically anything, image or video wise, using AI makes that seeing is believing approach, again, even more dangerous or even more risky. So I think it just goes back to these fundamentals of thinking about, again, these questions that we teach and in social studies classrooms, like where is this information coming from? And is that a trustworthy source? Those questions, again, that we're really hopefully like inculcating in students and then giving them strategies to do that kind of sourcing or that source investigation on the internet in effective ways, I think is still really promising. And helping them, not just trust what they see in front of them automatically and quickly, like we know they do so much of the time.
Definitely. It all ties back to that concept of education is about critical thinking, and critical thinking supports civic engagement, that the founding fathers worried that average people wouldn't have the skills, the knowledge, and the understandings to be able to participate effectively, to choose wisely who our government leaders would be at the local, state, and national level. I want to transition at this point. Jenny has asked me to share a little bit about the work that the Maryland Civic Education Coalition is doing. And I don't have slides prepared. I just want to share a little bit about a bill that we've supported, and some of the League of Women Voters members may have already heard about this. In 3 years ago, there was a complicated bill introduced in the Senate by one Republican. Last year, it was taken on by the senator from Poolesville and Gaithersburg, Cheryl Kagan. And this year, it also has a cross file in the House of Delegates. It is SB 8 and HB 72 that would establish a Maryland Seal of Civic Excellence program to recognize high school students with a diploma seal. They might wear a cord or a medal during graduation. They might have a seal affixed to their graduation diploma, or and it would also be added to their transcript. It's modeled after the successful Seal of Biliteracy program that Maryland began in 2017. And students across the state are now being recognized for excelling in learning a foreign language. Sometimes kids are even learning multiple foreign languages because it's exciting to win an award for your efforts. We know that Maryland has, since 1996-97, had a service learning requirement of 75 hours. We know that social studies is one of the better subjects in Maryland compared to many other states. However, we also think that the idea that students should be recognized at graduation, that parents should be celebrating civic education and civic excellence among the students, is a vivid reminder of the role of schools in forming an informed electorate as part of our democratic experiment here in America. So I share with you that this Seal of Civic Excellence Bill, SB 8 and HB 7, is still pending in the General Assembly. It has been passed by the Senate. However, the House Ways and Means Committee has not yet recommended to the general floor of the House that they pass it. So I share this with you in the interest that if you are interested in celebrating civic learning, civic excellence among high school students, and recognizing schools as civic centers of excellence, that these two bills could be passed through House Ways and Means and move on to the floor and be passed and signed by the governor. That being said, I want to open up that question of policymaking to the three of you lovely panelists and see, do you have thoughts on Maryland's policy and perhaps even the local policy level? Where are there areas that could be improved that a group like the League of Women Voters should be considering as they advocate for education at the local, state, and even federal level?
I can start us off just building from I spend so much of my time thinking about digital media and news literacy. And there are an increasing number of states that have passed laws requiring, some version of digital media literacy education, including New Jersey recently, California recently. Maryland is not one of those states. Unfortunately. And I think, and Tracy can speak more to this, I think the different districts have done a nice job incorporating that and selecting curriculum that teaches digital media literacy and incorporating that into schools or into advisory periods at least. But I think a law and the sort of like support for teacher education that would, and curriculum material, high quality curriculum materials that could come from a law like that would be really useful in terms of supporting that one piece of digital media literacy education in our state.
I understand that digital and media literacy was woven into the Center for Civic Education's new curriculum, Project Citizen. It's been around for a long time. It's being shifted to Project Community and will have media literacy embedded in each of the 6 units. And yet that is one of the many programs that has lost funding with the recent cuts at the federal level. So I'll shift to Tracy. It sounds like you have some things you'd like to share in terms of policy advocacy and the areas of need that you think that we could make a difference in.
So I just wanted to clarify, I will not say it's as robust as, let's say, a full course, but in multiple courses in multiple levels, elementary, middle, and high school, digital media literacy is part of social studies learning. The other piece I do want to highlight is that the social studies skills of corroboration, especially corroboration, right, and contextualization are extremely important in understanding or applying to being digitally literate, or in that sense of you have to learn to question what is before you. But I do want to say that it is interwoven. As far as advocacy, I feel, and this is me on my soapbox, I always say, I say publicly in many meetings, I think that social studies is probably one of the most important subjects, if not the most important. Yes, learning to read and write, learning math is extremely important. But when students walk outside, or when they're interacting with their peers in their schools, when they're interacting with adults, when they see different things in society, that's all social studies. You breathe social studies every day. And so for me, the advocacy is about highlighting the importance that students, if we are trying to create this perfect union, whatever, a more perfect union, or whatever, or we're living in this democracy, or a republic rather, then we need to ensure that our students have the skills to be the type of citizens that we're aiming to have, right? And so the advocacy, to me, honestly, needs to be at the elementary school level. Hands down. So for secondary, you're going to take a social studies class. It's built within your schedule. High school, it's going to be in your schedule. It's a graduation requirement. But across the state, social studies is, it varies between each LEA, but most do not have dedicated social studies time throughout the year. The amount, because of the science of reading and some of the adoptions that schools have made, the ELA block can be huge. It could be half the day almost for students. And then you have another big block for math. And then you have all the other mandatory COMAR or regulated or courses that they have to take by law, or content that they have to take by law, that people are trying to put into the schedule. And oftentimes social studies is left out. So to me, the advocacy should be that social studies has a dedicated time in elementary, kindergarten through 5th grade, throughout the whole year. Because the other piece is that some systems teach it only half a year. So what if you have it, I mean, it's going to be so uneven.
Yes.
So that's where the advocacy is for me.
I agree wholeheartedly on that one. And I can say that my own community in Western Maryland shifted the middle school schedule so that the students have 90 minutes of math and 90 minutes of reading, but they only get 45 of social studies and 45 of science. So the disinvestment in social studies is a real thing, and No Child Left Behind didn't do us any favors, but it's been going on for many decades. I would like to come back to that government exam and offer some perhaps perspective, ask a question. I understand that the Blueprint for Maryland's Future emphasizes the idea that students will be college and career ready by the end of 10th grade. Is that part of the logic why the 10th grade government exam happens in 10th grade?
So for MCPS, it happens in 10th grade. There are some LEAs or school systems in Maryland that have government in 9th grade. So it's where MCPS, and it's been in 10th grade for years and years and years. It has nothing to do with the blueprint, but it's been a 10th grade course for years. But in some LEAs, it's in 9th grade.
I think some older voters remember the days when there was a high school senior class, Problems of Democracy, or something similar to civics. Does Montgomery County have classes for the electives in junior, senior year for students that relate to civics and government?
So there's a comparative government course. I do want to just say our current system with electives, any teacher who's willing to teach a course and whose principal supports them teaching a course can apply to teach a pilot elective course. We work with them to try to get that approved through the Board of Ed. They pilot it. Once it's approved, they have to get a certain number of students, that's dependent on the school, to sign up for that course. They pilot it, and then we move it to the board to see if we can offer it to all schools. And that's how our courses are offered. So if there isn't a course, there's nothing, I'm trying to say, there's nothing prohibiting a course from being offered. But we do have a comparative government course, AP comparative government. We have peace studies. We have different types of courses, but a teacher can create it, or students can advocate for one for a teacher to create, and we will work with them to get that pilot up and running.
That's the democratic process in the works.
Exactly, yes.
So before we wrap up, I want to ask each of you one last brief answer. If you could tell students, young people, maybe they're pre-kindergarten all the way through postgraduate doctoral candidates, what would you tell students? What's one thing about the power of civic engagement that you want to share with young people?
You have a voice and you have a choice and you have more power than you realize.
Did she steal your answer, Tracy?
Exactly. But I was also, one thing I tell students is that they do not have to wait until they're adults to take action and change or advocate. They can do that now. And so my goal is to help them to live social studies now and not just study it.
Yeah, I would echo that and say, it's easy to get bogged down in the world as it is. And I think, taking even small steps that even elementary students can take, right, to make a difference in their world, I think it makes the world a better place and improves us as people and as community members. So I think, not viewing, 18 is the point at which we become civic actors, but we are civic actors from elementary school through, and we should treat students like that. And they have a voice, like Eliza said.
I can echo that wholeheartedly. I've seen it with my own children, my own students, that they really want a sense of agency. And when they see a sense of collaboration with their peers, when they see adults reflecting back their desire to make the world a better place, and even the resilience that comes from advocating for change and not getting everything that we want, having to learn about consensus building, is so good for the mental health of some of the young people in our world who are deeply struggling. So we've had an incredible discussion tonight. I want to extend my deepest thanks to each of you for participating, and to the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County for inviting all of us here today. For sharing your expertise and your experiences, I'm deeply grateful. Civic education is a shared responsibility, and the collaboration that you all have shown here tonight is part of the answer. I have hope because of the work that each of you does and the work of the League. So thank you to you. Thank you to our audience for joining us. And I encourage you to keep having these conversations and invest in civic education however and wherever you can make it happen in your world. And I'll pass it back to Jenny.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeannie. You've done an incredible job moderating. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks to our esteemed presenters and moderator, and thank you to everyone watching. If you enjoyed this free program and want to learn more about the League of Women Voters work in Montgomery County, you can find out more about us, including how to support our efforts at lwvmocomd.org. Thank you again, and good night.